Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. Today we're going to be building a deck around one pool 3 card, filled the rest of the way up with pool 1 and pool 2 resources. So recently on my free-to-play account I unlocked Juggernaut, and so I thought it'd be cool to draft a deck with you guys around this card and building a deck with this resource. Okay, so first up, what I would typically do is if I'm wanting to build a deck around one key card, I look at that card and I try to figure out what its strengths are. How am I going to utilize this as a potential win condition? And so for Juggernaut, his on reveal is if your opponent played a card here this turn, move them randomly. So through playing and through my experiences, that tells me there's a couple of ways that I can use this. I can either use this as a follow-up to a lane lockdown, so something like a Storm, or if I use this alongside one other 3-cost card on turn 6 to disposition the opponent's power so that they can't win whatever lane they're pushing for. Now typically the most successful one is using Storm to lock down the lane. That way you limit the amount of time that the opponent has to play in that location. You use Juggernaut as a follow-up to Storm, and then they don't have a chance to compete for the location. And so let's go ahead and we're going to start off with the Storm combo. This is one of the dynamic duos of the game. It's just they work so well together that it makes it really hard for the opponent to compete for that location. Now both of these can be pulled with a Magneto as you get deeper into pool 3, but I think we'll build around ways to kind of mitigate that chance. And so looking at this, if this is our win condition, if this is the way that we win one of the lanes, how do we win one of the other ones? And so I want to do an early tempo. I want to be able to do something where I push a lot of power and resource out onto the board early. That way, whenever we do drop Storm, Juggernaut, we either have a pretty decent push in one of the other lanes already, or we can drop a lot of resources towards the end of the game to find our win condition. And so I think I'm going to put Angela in our list. Angela is a fantastic early tempo card, and I like the disruption with Iceman and to an extent Korg. So now since we're in pool 3, we don't have to worry about Killmonger quite as much, but it is still a concern, so we don't really want to rely on these as our win conditions, rather as disruption tools, and then if they remain on the board, perfect. And so we have a couple of 1-cost cards. Typically I don't like more than 2. Sometimes if we're really leaning into that early or mid-range tempo, we do 3, but for the most part I like 2 in a list. And so looking at the Storm combo, I also really like the Odin on reveal kind of aspect of the build. And so we can do something like a Star-Lord. We can start leaning into some of our on reveal triggers. And so something like Star-Lord is a good 2-cost card that we can throw into the Angela lane. And actually, I know that I said we only like 2, but for now I'm going to tentatively throw Nightcrawler in. To me, this is another dynamic duo, that Nightcrawler into an Angela lane and then moving it into the Storm location allows for a lot of flexibility. And so I like this combo. We're going to tentatively throw that in. Maybe we take out one of our disruption tools, depending on what else we need. So these are all early game cards. How do we win the late game? And so I'm going to start looking at some late game combo plays. And so for me, if we're looking at limiting the number of lanes that the opponent has to play in, I honestly think an Odin play along with a Gamora is going to be fantastic. If they don't have a way to block this location and they use a Shang-Chi to destroy it, or if they don't have a Shang-Chi to destroy it, then we can pretty easily lock down a lane with Gamora into Odin, because it's going to be a really, really big power push. And so then along with that, I do like White Tiger, because if for some reason we don't have our Juggernaut and we get outpowered in the Storm lane, we do need a secondary win condition to push power over there, potentially. And so along with that, I like Jessica Jones. We're not always going to have the Storm into Juggernaut, and for me, a Storm into a Jessica Jones is another fantastic combination. It gives us a lot of power push, especially if we have the early game kind of tempo swing of maybe our Angela in the Storm lane. It allows us that flexibility in making sure we lock down that lane, and then we can kind of find our secondary win condition later on. And now with looking to protect some of our cards, and with how many destruction decks are out there right now, I honestly think our last add would be an armor. That can help us protect from Shang-Chi in the Gamora lane. It could help us protect our 1-cost cards, and you might even be able to take out one of these or 2 of these and add in an Infinite plus a Sunspot. If you have Sunspot in the armored lane and then you lock that down with Storm, it's a pretty easy skip until the end and then drop Infinite onto the board as your win condition. But we're going to play away from that play path, but just know that that is a pretty viable option if you want to tweak this and you don't necessarily like the disruption of these 1-cost cards. But for me, whenever I draft a deck, I like to look through it one by one just to make sure everything kind of flows together and works well. And so the first one being Iceman, that disrupts the opponent's curve ever so slightly, and it allows us to buff up our Angela or get tempo in a secondary lane. We have Korg, that's going to shuffle a rock into their list. Maybe they end up drawing the rock instead of something better, like their key combo piece. We have Nightcrawler as a secondary way to push a tiny bit of power into the Storm lane after the fact. And he's there to buff up our Angela even further and then move him out to really lean into getting the increased upside from our Angela. We have Star-Lord, who honestly feels kind of lackluster here because him plus White Tiger and Gamora are really our only on reveals that we would want to re-trigger with Odin. And so does he fit? He becomes, if we hit it, it becomes a 2-cost 5-power card. I don't know that we ever aim to place him in the Odin lane. Odin is really our kind of capstone for our Gamora lane or our White Tiger to push power into a secondary location. I think we take out Star-Lord. He's great if we hit it, but if not, he's just a 2/2. I think we go with something a little more consistent like Scorpion. I am a fan of Scorpion. He impacts the opponent's hand with -1 power, which initially doesn't feel like that much. But if you hit some key targets, if you hit some priority resources, or if you hit their Jessica Jones and then you end up dropping yours in the same lane as they do, then you're going to have that little bit of an advantage over them in that matchup. And so I think we go with Scorpion instead of Star-Lord. And then we look at armor. He does well at protecting our Gamora or our 1-cost cards in the Storm lane to make sure that they're not going to get a late turn Killmonger to swing that advantage in their favor. I think maybe we need a little bit higher power push, but I want to try this out for now. A lot of this is early game tempo with one big late game combo to find your win condition in that secondary lane. And so I think we lean in on this for now. My concern going into our first couple of games is winning our secondary lane. So I think maybe our game plan going in is that we play Angela not in the lane that we're planning on storming. That way we can get a pretty good power push whether we draw into both Gamora and Odin or not. Then we can continue to push high power in the Angela lane and push it up over the edge. Now we have Storm and Juggernaut, which are going to be great. Jessica Jones is another great follow-up to Storm, so I like this trio. We have White Tiger, Gamora, and Odin as our kind of late game powerhouses to try to finish off the game. And I think this is okay. I think it could use some optimization, but I think for our purposes, I think it's going to work pretty well as a pool 2 deck with only one addition of a pool 3 card. And so let's go ahead and jump over into a couple of games and see how it goes. All right, so first up we have Sir Fuzzleton. And in our starting hand, we have our Juggernaut. We have Angela, so we have a decent kind of curve combo, depending on what, well, we can't, Juggernaut's gonna be able to be played on 4, not on 3 now. And so we could force them to try to push a card into Warrior's Fall that they don't intend to be in Warrior's Fall, which I think we might aim for. If we draw into Storm, then we're gonna drop that in one of the lanes to see if maybe Mirror Dimension can copy into it. But otherwise, I like the idea of forcing them to have cards here that they're not intending to have. And now typically I would play away from Warrior Falls, but if this is the lowest cost card, they should kill each other, I think, and Warrior Falls resolves before Sunspot gets buffed up, and so we could find ourselves with a little bit of upside here. And so I think it's a risk that we're going to take. We're okay if Korg does get destroyed, but I think at least it being a tie, they may kill themselves. It may result in a neutral draw, but either way, I think this gives us a decent shot at destroying their Sunspot here. Nope, so it does result in a tie. Oof. And so we need something more than 2 power so that we can destroy both of these cards now. So let's go with a Juggernaut. Juggernaut's going to be fine. Not the intended use for Juggernaut that I had, but it's going to make sure that they can't drop anything here. That means that this is going to be the lowest card, the lowest power card, at least until it absorbs energy. But Warrior Falls will resolve before Sunspot absorbs any energy. And so we can take advantage of that. Now our Juggernaut is going to push something out of the Warrior Falls lane and over into the hub. So it's a Jessica Jones. And so we get the upside of pushing that over into a lane that they've already invested some resources in, which is fantastic. So now looking at this, we can do a simple Red Skull. If we think that that's going to be the highest power card, that's going to destroy some of the low cost cards if they throw them there. I think we can get an advantage unless they just throw a lot of resources here. I think our Red Skull from the hub is okay. Magic from the hub is going to work as well. That still leaves us with our Red Skull. That's still a really big power push. And then now we do have our Gamora. And so we could either do Gamora here to really elevate our power push in this location. We could do a Mysterio here. It'll buff the Angela lane up here. We can then maybe do a Nightcrawler, or maybe we split our differences. I know we have 13 power to make up in this lane, but this would be 8 and this would be 5. So it's going to be our 13 right there, but we won't be able to play anything in this lane afterwards. Okay, so that's important to think about. We could do White Tiger to push power here and here. Maybe we do a White Tiger here and then an Odin here on that last turn to push more power out on the board. I think that's okay. We're gonna go with that. We might even do maybe a Gamora and a Mysterio on the final turn. It just depends on what they drop and where. And so they do drop in the Limbo location. And so let's see what resource they ended up pushing out. And I think we would probably want to snap here, but I think we're gonna hold off. And so they could do an Odin in mid. We're gonna do a Gamora because that will kind of counteract and keep the pace with their Gamora. We will have the same benefit there. They're just gonna have an additional 10, which puts them to 24. And so we would still keep the advantage here as long as they didn't drop 2 resources in this lane. And then we were gonna have the big push in the hub. So not a bad first entry for the deck. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one, see if we can keep it going. All right, so next up we have Amish or Amish. The first location is Baxter Building. We have our Juggernaut to push any kind of cards late game that they push out. So maybe we even invest into Baxter Building without... Death's Domain means that we need to win the Baxter Building location. Either that or we can use Storm to change this location. But we need to lean into the Baxter Building, I think, regardless. So they do a Scorpion and a Sunspot, so they have the tempo drops as well. We don't have Killmonger, unfortunately, so we're not going to be able to take care of their Sunspot. I think we drop Armor in Death's Domain. We can do a Korg over into Baxter Building. That's going to shuffle a Rock into their deck. Ooh, they're skipping here, which is kind of scary. That means that they might have an Infinite, or maybe they just don't have anything great to play on this turn. But they are going to be able to create a pretty large Sunspot, and we don't have an answer to it, unfortunately. So I think we play our Jessica Jones into Death's Domain. We're going to kind of slow play it if we need to, and if it looks like they're dropping an Infinite on the final turn, maybe we can disposition it with our Juggernaut to find a win condition. So they play Jessica Jones into Baxter Building. That's going to give them a pretty big lane advantage over us. So I think we're going to do Scorpion and Nightcrawler. We can move our Nightcrawler out on that last turn if we need to. We do have Juggernaut if we want to use that on one of the last turns. Ooh, they just skip and don't play anything. That is awfully scary. Okay. So if they're playing Infinite, we have a super small chance. I think if they're playing Infinite, they play it into Washington, D.C., right? This is a 7-power differential, and so maybe we hope that they're going to play it into one of these 2 lanes, and then we can steal Baxter Building with an Odin plus Angela, and that will give us the win condition. Either that or this is 4. That'd push us up to 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's not going to be enough. Unfortunately, doing the Juggernaut here to push out a potential Infinite is not going to win it for us. So I think we have to lean into the Odin and just hope that they play their Infinite in one of the other 2 lanes. So they do play it over into Washington, D.C., but that is okay because we're going to be able to swing the Baxter Building in our favor. That gives us both Death's Domain and Baxter Building as our win conditions because our Angela got so incredibly large that we were able to find our win condition regardless. It's one of those that the hard play was for them to stack all of their cards and all of their power into one singular location because Baxter Building was that critical in finding that last turn win condition. But luckily we were able to get the read, we were able to kind of counterplay around it and find the win condition. All right, so next up we have Mishka. The first location is Wakanda, so we don't have to worry about our cards being destroyed there. I think we early drop our Iceman. That's going to disrupt their curve a little bit. Maybe we hit a key card, and they're no longer going to be able to play that card. Kamar Taj is pretty decent for us if we get If we get a white tiger, we can fill up the rest of the board with white tiger tokens. If we need to push Gamora, that's going to trigger twice, so it's a 17 power play initially, which is phenomenal, and then triggering 4 more times if Odin hits it as well. That can be an absolutely massive lane. And because of that, we're going to throw armor into this secondary location to make sure that if we do play our really large, powerful card, that it's not going to be able to be destroyed. And so they tempo drop a Scorpion as well, which is okay. So do we disposition their power and their cards with a Juggernaut? It's not ideal, but if they're doing an on reveal card, we might be able to get it to trigger just once instead of twice. No, we don't, unfortunately. We probably should have held it for a little bit more advantageous position. Oh, so they play Goose, interestingly enough. Do we play Jessica Jones here? Do we play it here? Or, I mean, do we play it here or here? I like the Gamora play into Kamartaj, so I think I'm going to do Jessica Jones into Grand Central. We'll do Gamora into Kamartaj, a white tiger, or unless we draw a white tiger this next turn. If we draw a white tiger here, then we would play white tiger into Kamartaj instead. So I'm going to go ahead and snap into the Gamora play. We don't know for sure. Now, if Odin pulls here, that's actually going to allow us to buff up Jessica Jones once this turn, and then once at the end of next turn as well. And so it'd be a 12 power Jessica Jones, and so it'd be a total of 18 power in this lane because of the Odin, which would be pretty big. Let's go ahead and play Gamora into mid. We're gonna hope that that gets hit with the Kamartaj, and it does. And so that's gonna be a really, really big Gamora. And so they use a Professor X to lock down Kamartaj, but that is rather unfortunate because we do continue to have that win condition. Now, they send a Green Goblin to us in Grand Central, not purposely, but they do. So we can do Odin, and that's going to be, not only is it 6 power, but it's going to be 12 power, because it's taking the -3 off of our side, so that's a 3 power positive swing on our side, and then it's going to be a -3 on theirs, so it's going to be a 6 power swing just from the Green Goblin, and then a 6 power swing from the Odin as well. So I think this is our secondary win condition. They could have a Destroyer, and if they have a Destroyer, then we tie this lane, we lose this one, but we win Kamartaj by so much. But I think we're going to be fine. This could be a Destroyer play. They would end up destroying the Green Goblin. That would make sense with a potential Goose and a Professor X. Maybe they're looking for a... The Doc Ock is a strange one. Maybe they're looking for a potential like Spectrum. We'll take the random Doc Ock though. We'll take the 4 cubes. We are absolutely fine with that. And we are slowly but surely gaining and climbing, gaining cubes and climbing with our pool 3, our deep pool 3 account with this pool 2 build with just Juggernaut added. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, so next up we have Enokia. The first location is Stark Tower, which is going to be decent for us to have several cards there. So I think we're going to play our Iceman. Next turn we can do Scorpion. That's going to disrupt their curve and disrupt their power of the cards that they have in hand. We do have Jessica Jones to drop on 4. If we can draw into Storm, that's going to be phenomenal. If not, then we'll look for... We'll take it. We will absolutely take it. So the game absolutely hurt us. We're going to go ahead and snap into turn 2. We have a pretty solid turn 3 and 4 play in this far right lane. And that'll give us some additional kind of space and time to draw into our last game, or kind of the last couple of turn win conditions. So they skip on turn 2 as well. So they have 5 cards that now have the -1 power because of Stark Tower. We have initiative, so even if they play into Shuri's Lab this turn, it's not going to get doubled because we're going to change it to the stormed location already. Ooh, and they play into Nowhere. Interesting. That's not going to get them. That's going to get them nowhere. So we have the flooded lane. Let's do Jessica Jones. Both of these can be pulled by Magneto, but if they do have a Magneto, it won't be able to trigger in the middle location. And we're going to have Stark Tower full enough that they're not going to be able to pull all the resources out and over like they would want to. So let's go with the Jessica Jones. That's typically a pretty easy win condition. And then we do have the matchup of the Jessica Jones, but because this one was impacted by Scorpion, it's actually a little bit less powerful than our own. So here I think we do Angela and Nightcrawler. That's going to buff this lane up a little bit. It also gets our Nightcrawler onto the board, so if it looks like we need to push power into the flooded lane, we can. And then this protects our 1-cost cards in Stark Tower, so if they're wanting to drop a Killmonger, they're not going to be able to do that either. And then all 3 of these are going to get buffed up from Stark Tower. So if we get something like a Gamora, we should be able to probably find our win condition here. Ooh, and then they do a Bucky Barnes and a Carnage, and we hard counter it. That is unfortunate, my friend. And so sometimes it just kind of falls like that. But with that win, I believe that's 4. With that win, we went 5-1 with this deck list. One of them was up against a very obvious bot though, and so I didn't include that one, but we went 5 wins and 1 loss with this list, and we're pretty deep into pool 3. I think we're collection level like 1600 now, and so we're pretty far along. But overall, the deck feels pretty solid. It does what it's intended to do. You're not going to see a lot of 8 cube games with this one unless you hold your Juggernaut for that last turn play, but it's inherently risky to do that because you don't know where Juggernaut is going to push that resource on that last turn. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.